Welcome to A Better Way to Do College, the podcast where we explore how higher education is evolving and what it means for access, opportunities, and the communities we serve. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Gonzales, Chancellor of the Maricopa Community Colleges. Today, we're asking the question, what does access mean beyond an admissions application? Getting accepted to a higher education institution is important, but real access is what happens next, whether students can navigate the systems, policies, and support structures that shape if they stay on track, complete, and reach their goals. To explore this, my guest today is Rich Nickel, President and CEO of Education Forward Arizona, an organization focused on improving education outcomes statewide and expanding pathways to education so that all Arizonans, regardless of background, can build the skills to thrive and strengthen Arizona's economy. In this conversation, we will talk about what true access looks like in practice and what Arizona can do across education and workforce partners to help more students complete the path they start. Because if higher education promises opportunity, access is what makes the promise real. So let's explore a better way to do college. Welcome, Rich. How are we doing today?
Good. Great way to start the week, being here with you all, and appreciate the opportunity to talk about some important issues when it comes to value post-secondary education and just really involving more students in that.
Well, we're so glad that you're here and able to join us on our fourth edition of this podcast. We're going to be talking about access, among other things, but first, let's let our audience know a little bit about who you are, because I think you work for a really cool organization.
Great. So my name is Rich Nickel. I'm president and CEO of an organization called Education Forward Arizona. One of the neat things about Education Forward Arizona is that it actually is an organization that was created by bringing 3 education nonprofits together 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. The goal of that and what the community really asked us to do was to provide a more robust and comprehensive and coordinated voice around the value of education, as an education advocate, and really for everybody in the state and all those people who live here. So that's been a really great opportunity. Mm-hmm. And every day we think about what that community vision for us was, and we go out there and try to make that happen.
I think oftentimes in our state we see organizations out there with very similar interests, oftentimes competing for limited resources, space, time, and energy involved in that work. And I think the genius behind the powers that be at that time decided that these 3 organizations should have a singular focus, and that was focus on completion, correct?
Right, yeah. So the Achieve 60 AZ goal, which is our post-secondary attainment goal here in Arizona, that says that anyone from 25 to 64 years old, at least 60% of those should have a high value credential. Right. We're not all caught up in what degree that looks like or what certificate that looks like. We are caught up in making sure that those credentials are of value, though.
Sure.
And so we really, outside of kind of our voice work, we are pursuing that North Star goal of 60% attainment in this state.
When we say access in higher education, what does that actually mean to you beyond just being admitted to a college?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think it's people are starting to understand more. So, when I first started running a version of this organization almost 15 years ago, we were really focused on just helping more people get access to post-secondary enrollment and enroll. Mm-hmm. One thing we realized really quickly was that just being able to help get access to enrollment was really only half the battle, mm-hmm. right? So that access doesn't just mean access to enrollment. It also means access to the resources you need, to the supports you need, access to opportunities. So it's really, this continuum of access. And it doesn't stop the day you walk onto your first college or university campus. Or you take that first online class.
Right.
That's just the beginning of the access story. So, we've done some special things, especially with those that we have a funding interest in, a scholarship in, to really help them gain access to all of these other access portals.
Sure.
And we've seen pretty good success from that. One of the numbers we talk about is that, students from low-income communities traditionally, historically, don't graduate at the same rates as some of their peers who might have more resources
Right.
And more supports. So what we've done over time is increased, almost doubled that person's chances of graduating through all the supports that are really supporting that access along the continuum.
So where does access actually begin then for you?
So I think that access, especially if you're really talking about post-secondary access, probably begins in the middle school level, or maybe even before now. Especially as we're talking about how access to post-secondary is really the bridge to workforce. So, if we talk about access even starting with getting a better understanding of what a career might look like, or a high wage, high demand opportunity might look like, which, by the way, there are a lot of those here and a lot of those coming to our state. We need to drive that further down in the chain.
Right.
Middle schoolers really need to start getting an understanding of the opportunities that are available. It's complicated because those opportunities are constantly changing now.
Right.
Some of those opportunities are hyper-local. That access, I really think, starts when somebody starts getting that vision of what they want to be or the problem they want to solve.
Yeah.
And then moving towards that through these common pathways.
Right. So you and your team are directly involved in helping create access and helping make that vision come to life for students. I've come across research that says that when a student is in 5th grade, that student understands their family dynamic enough to have an understanding of whether they can afford to go to college.
Yeah.
So what are you all doing to address that? And is that something that you've seen that backs that research as boots on the ground there?
Yeah, that's early foreclosure on opportunities by students that understand that certainly starts as early as 5th grade.
Yeah.
And it's tragic in many ways because people are, self-selecting out sometimes before they really understand what's available. It's not their fault, though. It's our fault.
Right.
And not just our organization, but we that are in this space and care about serving more students from more spaces. And the reason it's our fault is because we're not doing a great enough job right now getting information into the hands of people that provides hope. Without hope, you just have despair, right? So we have to provide information that provides hope of what is possible.
Right.
And then as an organization, that's part of our job in the beginning, is giving people resources and tools that can provide hope. Our state historically has not had strong targeted financial aid programs for low-income students and still don't to this day. So we do become very reliant upon federal funding, help with the affordability puzzle. We have to be talking to people about what that looks like very early to let them know that that affordability puzzle can be solved.
Yeah.
So we're doing that, and then a lot of other programmatic type things too.
What are you all seeing as some of the common breakdown points for students that end up being the barriers to access?
So we actually did a full public opinion poll on this. So we took a shot at about 600 young people who had either started some type of post-secondary enrollment here in Arizona and dropped out quickly, or some who never made it there. And we asked them this exact question. I think that we, as people in education, we overthink this a lot. We're thinking about, they may not feel comfortable there. There may not be something close to them. Whatever the political sign of the day is telling us is wrong with post-secondary education. None of that polled. Here's what polled. It costs too much, and I can't get child care if I want to go back to school.
Those were the two common
That's it.
top two items.
It's affordability in a bunch of different ways. And then also all the cost. And this is all perception, right? That people have. So then all the costs that are adjacent to the cost. So things like child care, things like lost opportunity at work, family dynamics where they need to support their family in some way. So those were the big things, but it's not the only things, obviously. We know along the way that, a million things happen, and especially for those who don't go to a college or university right after their high school graduation, let's say.
Yeah.
That gets even more complicated for a lot of people.
So what might you suggest that Maricopa colleges do to address those issues that you just described that are barriers to access?
And I tell college leaders this often, sometimes to my own peril, but I think you'll understand the intention. Maricopa community colleges and community colleges in Arizona, generally speaking, are affordable or among the most affordable options you will ever find for the value that you are getting of education. Doesn't mean people think they can afford it, though.
Right.
So what Maricopa, I think, has to do or should be doing, or maybe just doing better, is really making sure people understand the value of that education and that it is affordable earlier and earlier. No one should ever not attend one of the Maricopa colleges because they don't think they can afford it. I mean, if you come from a low-income community or family, you complete that FAFSA, you get a Pell Grant, guess what? You're paid for.
Right.
And people just they generally don't know that at early enough stages to make good decisions about how they get there.
Sure.
So, it's funny, and I was in the corporate world, before I became a nonprofit leader. If somebody doesn't understand your product, it's not their fault. If somebody doesn't understand the value proposition that you're offering, it's not their fault. It's our fault, right? All of us together. So we just have to do a better job at, telling people that they can do it.
Appreciate that advice, and when you're out talking with those students, remind them that we now have a Maricopa College Promise.
Absolutely.
That helps students with costs regardless of where they're attending, and so we're really proud of that. We've worked with communities to expand that. If we were to design around students' real life and not any assumptions, what should students no longer have to figure out on their own and instead have the institution designed for them?
I think number one, we can do a much better job at the entire application process. We actually have enough data in our system. If everybody has the right access to it and it's being collected in a quality way, where nobody should ever have to apply to any of our colleges or universities, we should know if we can accept them. Yeah. And every student should be able to understand that. We also, have to make this process of figuring out the pathway for you to get to where you want to go common and simple. I think that a lot of students and their parents have some idea of what they want to do or the problem they want to solve, and they literally have no idea how to get there.
Wow.
It seems like a really complicated process to have to do some type of application, maybe take some kind of test, do this financial aid paperwork, get in contact with somebody at school, kind of figure out what they have, then understand if what you want to do is a pathway they can help you with, and then what that looks like, how long it's going to take, what's my cost look like 2 or 3 years out. I mean, it's a lot.
It is a lot.
And the more we can simplify that, the better we will be at helping to provide that access and then continuing those access points along the way.
I think you're spot on with that. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about some funding and policy. So state funding and policy shape the environment institutions operate in. How does that environment influence access and completion, and where do institutions still have room to act?
Complicated question, and it's also in an ever-changing kind of dynamic. So, if you look at state funding traditionally, post-secondary education, almost, people will argue it, but it's hard to argue, has been deprioritized over time. Certainly for community colleges, I know what your line item budget is, and it's you don't have to count too high to get there. And for our universities also. I think generally speaking, the opportunity is for us to kind of reframe and help our policymakers understand that investing in community colleges, investing in Maricopa Community College District, investing in post-secondary, investing in targeted financial aid, because we have to have more people participate,
Sure,
is worth it. You know, and that is what we have been really talking to people about. But it's a hard conversation sometimes, and hard, especially in this kind of dynamic environment of how much value people want to believe higher education has, or
Right.
post-secondary education. So I think that's the number one opportunity, is to figure out how we reframe this more as an investment and less as an expense at the state level. It's unfortunate because I think there's no doubt that community colleges are going to play a more important role than they ever have in the future, because they are the natural bridge between education and the needs of employers. And today that's done, I won't say in a haphazard way, but it's really a lot of individual deals being cut between employers and community colleges or community college systems, because community colleges can act quickly, they're innovative. And so what you're seeing are a lot of innovative, smaller programs, maybe not quite able to be scaled to be leveraged across the state. I think there's a great opportunity for some coordination to take place in that space to really help bridge statewide strategy and leverage. And so that's something we're certainly taking a look at, is what would the right ecosystem in Arizona look like to really drive more people working together, to really drive programs that are models that are scalable. So I think you'll see us really digging in on that over the next couple of years too.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more on that, Rich, in terms of a more coordinated effort to collaborate around the idea of, responding to the needs of the state. Also, in looking at different ways to change the narrative and the reasons as to why higher education should be seen as an investment, or education period, in our state. Your organization did a really cool report about a year ago and released it, and I think that was helping to change the narrative on that, and that was the Billions to Gain report. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, as an advocacy organization, you can't just talk about things. You have to have some backbone, some platform to launch your advocacy from. In Arizona, and I think many other states, if you're not putting things in economic terms, the value of the product to the state in some way, then you're not getting enough people's attention. One of the things we decided to do is really take a look at what is the value of post-secondary education to individuals, communities, and the state. And so this title emerged after the report was done, this Billions to Gain, because literally, Arizona has billions to gain if we enroll and then help people be successful at higher rates. And it's not small potatoes here.
Right.
We're looking at, for every 10% of students, for every increase we can have of 10% of students, you're looking at over a couple $2 billion. It's massive and transformative. And but education is the proven way throughout time to get people that type of mobility.
Since Achieve 60 AZ launched 9 years ago, we've seen attainment rates in Arizona increase from 42% to 49%, which is real progress, right? But we're still short of the 60% goal. How do you interpret both the progress and the persistence of the gap?
Yeah, the progress is substantial, especially when you think about the economic impact of the progress. So just to give some flavor, each basis point, each percentage point of gain is worth about 35,000 to 40,000 net new credentials or degrees coming to our state or being in our state.
Yeah.
Let's call it 40,000 for easy math. We've gained 7 percentage points. We're looking at almost 300,000 net new degrees in our state. Those 300,000 net new degrees in credentials, they throw off hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars in economic gains for us.
Yeah.
So that progress is real. It's substantial. It's not enough, as you mentioned. I think us getting to the 60% is definitely going to take increased effort, increased policy, increased commitment. But the other thing I'll say is that now is the time, especially as we open up our minds to all the skills that are needed here in the state, all the great jobs that are here and the great jobs that are coming, it's going to do two things. One, it's going to drive people to our state that have those credentials. They count in that number. But also it's going to open up and illuminate all these opportunities for our pipeline. People are in our pipeline to really get trained up for, get the skills they need, get the education they need to get those jobs. So I think in the next 5 to 6 years, we could see a massive leap in attainment because all these things lining up. And if we don't, every percentage point is worth 35 or 40,000 net new degrees. So the byproduct of pursuing that goal is really the number one outcome that we're looking for.
So if access is part of higher education's promise, what's the one system or policy that you'd prioritize if you could just make it happen? What would you change?
I've said this publicly a few times. If Arizona really wants to get more people involved, we have to find a way to have robust and substantial targeted financial aid as part of our system and part of our core. There are many states around the country who are investing, $500 million, $1 billion in state-based targeted financial aid to help their own students access their own colleges and universities. We have a small Arizona Promise program, which the community colleges are now also part of, but it's a year-by-year proposition, so it's hard to even market from a university or community college standpoint in some ways, because you can't really go talk to an 8th grader about it because you don't know what the funding stream will look like, right? So I think, if we ever could get to a place where we really were offering substantial, robust, easy to access financial aid targeted at the group that we really need to participate more in our state to meet our goals, that would be the number one thing for me. And it has been for the last 15 years. I mean, I've done a lot of different work trying to get there and trying to bring people with us. And people aren't against it. They just haven't figured out what the right investment looks like.
Very good.
Or how to pay for it.
Well, Rich, I've been in many meetings together, and I've been able to watch what you've done with the organization you lead, and you have certainly lived by the words that you've just described, and you've told us in many ways what type of leader you are. So we just appreciate you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast today.
Yeah, I loved it.
I thank you for our partnership that we have between our two organizations. I look forward to our continued good work together, and keep up the good work out there. Thank you, Rich.
You too. Thank you.